Alright, so I got this video that's been something I've been wanting to put together for a little while. I've had a lot of people ask me how I make my harnesses. If you're buying a set of lights, this isn't pertain to you as much as it would if you're making them. But you know, some people might find it interesting how I do it versus maybe somebody else. For me, I've tried a few different ways, but I think this is the cleanest method to do it for the end result. You know, when you go to throw them on the car, there's just a lot less to the actual install this way. So you see the basic stuff I got: wire cutters, strippers, a couple screwdrivers, scissors, soldering iron, couple quick connects, different wiring, some little PEX sleeving stuff there. I got 3-pin wiring for the addressable LEDs, as well as 5-pin for my RGBW demon eyes that I'll be using on this set. A little bit of electrical tape. As far as the controller itself goes, I have a 5-volt inverter. This is just a 10 amp, which will be fine for this application. I've got a cable gland. It's 11 mil project box. So I can get these pretty cheap on Amazon. I think they're like 20 for $10 or something like that. There's a 3-way switch. This is how I do my the selector for your demon eyes. So you can have it on the DRL, or you can have it on always on, or you can just turn it off completely. And then Ghost controller, and then this is my RGB controller. So that's the basics of what I use. Oh, and a drill with a step bit. So the first thing I do, I will open this up and I remove the Ghost controller. I don't use their box. I just started doing my own boxes. I mean, they're cheap enough that, you know, I mean, I'm sure you could use this and it would probably work perfectly fine, because it's really about the same size. But I like my boxes a little better. They're sealed up. They don't have the holes on the side. I have done this, like I just did one for my truck a little while ago, and it didn't have a one of those in it, so I just taped up the sides and just ran it direct to this, and that worked. What you could do is you could just take the cover off of this. You could run your wires to your quick connects here, your terminal screw terminals, and then you could run them just straight out the top, tape off the sides, and then fill it with epoxy. And I mean, that would work fine, especially if you're just doing this. It's a little hard to get this in there and that and do it all and then run the wires, and I do a lot of wires. If you're doing all this stuff, it's going to be quite a bit. So I just pull it out. I toss these. Okay, so next part, so that's your Ghost controller. I will screw a hole in here a little bit to the side. And you just want it just big enough that this fits through. So I gotta go one more step. Right there. So it'll fit through like that. I'll open this up. And then for this to fit in there, I do have to grind this down. So I got a little grinder sand. Alright, so I just took the belt sander to it. Take off the little excess there. Just like that. I could put it in right like that. Screw it on. And that way it sits below the lip, so I can still close it. Close the box back. Alright, one more hole. And that'll be up the top here. So I'll usually just start it. And that's where my little switch, two-way switch, three-way switch will go. Right in there like that. And this is a three-way switch. You got the, there's your center contact. Option 1, option 2. If it's in the middle, it's off. You got option 1, you got option 2. So just like that. So the next thing I do, get that out of the way. I will grab some wiring here. I'm going to make two that are about the length that you want for the driver's side. So you got to consider the car and where the battery's located and where you want to put the controller and all that stuff. But most of the time I do like a little over a foot. Do another one at the exact same length for your triggers. Then I'll do one that's long enough to go to the other side of the car. So usually about arm's length, and then give it just a little bit more, another foot or so. That's enough. So I've got those three, and then I'll use this little 18 gauge here, and I'm going to cut like 6-7 inches. I'll cut another one same length. And I'll do the same with red. So there is that. Alright, I'll strip the ends of them. And then on this controller, use just a little screwdriver that'll fit in the terminals so you can make sure they're backed off the whole way. These are marked on the boards, 12 volt and your ground. It's important to keep track of what's your 12 volt and what's your 5 volt so you don't cross them. So using red and black on both may not be the best way to do that. If you're worried, you could always just substitute for a different color. I mean, in general, just go dark. You know, maybe you got green and white or something. You can make your white your 5 volt. You can make your green your 5 volt ground or something. I do it a little bit differently when I'm going to run it, so I'll know which is which. But I'm just screwing in based on the markings on the board. My 12 volts, my grounds. These are 5 volt LEDs. Your controller needs both a it needs a 12 volt source. I haven't done a whole lot with the 12 volt LEDs, so yeah, I'm honestly, I don't even know if you even not need a 5 volt input. I think you just put 12 volt to it, and I think you just do dual 12s if you're doing 12 volt, but I'm sure the information is out there if you need it. I've just always messed with 5, so I haven't even tried that yet. But in this case, yeah, so you need the 5 volt input, you need the 12 volt input there. You're going to grab one of your, like, roughly foot long. Go ahead and strip that one. Stripped a little more than I want. Go. And just kind of pull them apart a little bit. Those will go right up here in the top. Now, your first input is your brake line. You can use that as an additional hardline show mode. So you can actually wire that up to a switch. I've done that on my trunk setup and a couple other things, so where you open the door and it automatically turns on show modes. So I mean, that's kind of cool for that. In general, when it comes to lights that I sell, it adds another step. It adds another complication to the build, so I don't do it. Somebody specifically asks, I probably will if I know they know what they're doing about wiring. But I just, like, yeah, I mean, you're going to have to run a wire, like, into the cab of your car, and I don't need phone calls asking me how to do that. So, honestly, I don't even include that part. You don't need it because you got the app. The app will do it all. But if you want it, or you're doing a certain application that might have a use for it, that is a benefit to the brake line, because it is a brake line, but you can sub it as a show mode line. So if you're doing headlights or you're doing something else, if you are doing taillights, then yeah, you're going to need that brake line as well, so you have to use a bigger one. Now, in this case, these are signal wires, so you don't need much wiring. Now, this is 18 gauge, but you could totally get away on the signal wires with doing like a 22. With one exception, and that is that I do run the DRL through, or I do run the power through for the RGB controller through the DRL. So you want to be beefy enough that you aren't risking shorting out any wiring or anything if you're going to do it the same way with the switch. So that is something I do. Next, I'm going to go ahead and strip these two. So on these, you know, it doesn't really matter because you can switch it in the app as far as left and right. The big thing is that your power, your data input, and then your ground, power, data input, ground. That's how it is. If you don't know, it's on the back, and it's also taped to the bottom of the box. I find it's easier to run these wires if you pull it out. It's actually kind of difficult to do it with it screwed into the Ghost box. You can always just pull it out if you're planning on using a Ghost box and run the wires and then put them right back in and screw them down, and it'll work perfectly fine for you that way. But this just makes it easier to get the wires screwed in securely and hopefully without any issues. So you want to make sure you have enough wire that it goes in, but also not so much that you've got, you know, metal exposed. If you can help it. Like, I got a little bit on the power lines, but that'll be okay. I mean, I'm gonna have to. They're gonna get bent anyways when they run out the front of the box. At least for my setup, they are. So I'll tighten this one down here, and that's about all the connections there. It is important that you know, like in this case, like, you know, rather than having 27 different colors of wire and big spools and everything, I'm just, you know, I'm getting what I get. Red, white, and blue on these. Some brands are different, and I've got tons of different brands. I think this one's Ali Altav or something like that. I've got some BTF 18 gauge as well, which is more the standard, I think it's red, green, and white, I believe. So, I mean, you got to make sure that you know which wire does what when you're wiring this up. I mean, in the case of the BTF, the white wire is ground. In the case of this one, the white wire is your data wire. The blue is your ground, and the red is your power. So, you know, you've got to use some common sense when you're working with this stuff, and understand that, you know, wire colors don't mean definitively that it is something. I mean, I try to use black for ground, and I try to always use red for power when I can, but you know, when you're doing a data line, I guess I could do 3 different wires and go, you know, yellow for my turns and white for my DRL, like, you know, it's a kind of more of a standard color. But in this case, I mean, I'm using the wires I got. I'm making it work. If you want to try to color code, you can, but it's totally not necessary the way I designed this controller, because the end user, you're not really going to have to need to know any of this stuff. All you're going to have to do is plug it in, so I'm not that worried about color coding it. But, alright, so let me get this box here, and I'm going to start running the wires through. So I got these 2, which are my 2 channels for the addressable LEDs. What I'm going to do on this one, turn on my power there, is I'm actually going to pull this one out because I need the red wire. I need the 12 volt power and the 12 volt ground. So, cut a little bit more lead, red wire, not much, and I will strip a moderate amount there. And then what I'm going to do is cut this one, the power, 12 volt power wire, and then strip it just a hair, twist them together, and then take my little lead wire here and I'll twist that together. Then, so when it holds on, I'll go ahead and solder that. So it's nice and snug. The other thing I needed, I didn't grab shrink tubing. So I'll grab, yeah, about an inch of shrink tubing. Slide that right over like that. And then I got my heat gun over here. I'm gonna just hit that with heat. From a heat gun, lighter, butane torch, whatever you use for that. I think a heat gun works best, just to get a little bit. And I'm going to trim just a hair of that off because I want it to sit flush on all the wires, a little bit tighter. Alright, so I'm going to put the 12 volt right back in. And I'm going to tighten that down. Next, got ground. Need I'm gonna do, I'll do the controller. Where did I put the controller? There's the controller. Okay, controller. The way I'm gonna do the controller, on my controllers, if you get them from me, this is how they look. I think I'm selling for like 30 bucks a pop or something like that, but these are made for if you've got like an RGB or an RGBW device from maybe Profile, or you know, maybe you got some halos from Profile or something like that, something from TRS. These will plug directly in and work. It's got a fuse on it. It is Bluetooth. It is waterproof. They're epoxied on the inside, and all you got to do is strip the wiring and run it to your battery. You can add terminals if you want or whatever you need. And so, I mean, it's a really good plug-and-play option if you're not wanting to get the XBT. Maybe you don't need 3 channels. I mean, that is a heck of a lot of controller if you're only running a set of Demon Eyes or a Halo. This is a nice alternative to that. I mean, if you're running 3 channels, this is not cost-effective at all. But for 1 channel, that's why I had them made up. And more than not, I ended up designing this, well, you know, coming up with this combination for the box. And I used to be able to put this whole thing in there as is, but they added these screw terminals, which is awesome. I love the screw terminals, very happy with them, but unfortunately it won't fit in there now. So what I do is I have to actually open this up, pull that out. I'll actually cut off one of the leads here because it's kind of hard to get 2 leads to run out, and being that it's RGB, all I have to do is just split off of this once I run one side out. So I just cut one side off. I will cut off here, and actually in this case I'm going to use this fuse as the fuse for the entire controller when it's done. So I leave enough of a lead on that I can use it. The black I won't need. And I'm going to pull this one out. Now this, you know, this all depends, like whatever circumstance you're using, whatever controllers you're using, you may have some other options that are a little better for you. You may need a bigger project box, depending on what you're running. So you know, I mean, you gotta make whatever you got work. Obviously, you know, not everything is completely universal, so just depending on the circumstances of what you got. But you got an idea of what I do, how I run it. So you can see there it is. It's cased in epoxy there, but I was able to just pop it right out because it's kind of like they like poured it over top of the controller. So I won't need that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a larger piece of heat shrink. And this is just so that I can put it in here and not worry about it touching anything. So I just slide that heat shrink right around there like that. And actually I think I'm going to run the grounds. I'll run the wires out this way, just to try to get it in there a little bit easier. Alright, and now I'm going to hit that with the heat. And there it is. So that's the controller. I mean, you can buy these super cheap. You know, these are pretty good controllers, like Magic LED. I think you can buy them on like Amazon for like 10, 20 bucks. I mean, the only downside is that you won't have the added connectors. The biggest thing with these, really the only thing that makes them cost effective, is if you're looking for a plug and play option. Not everybody wants to run wiring, solder things, open up the controller, add things. The way these controllers normally come, they got a little 5-pin push-in thing where they fall out so easily. They're not waterproof. They're just, I don't know, I don't think they're that great. I think this just made it more practical. Given that I'm cutting them open and cutting the wires off and doing everything, it's probably stupid that I'm using them, but you know, I got them, so I'm going to use them. Okay, so I'll also cut off the end here, because I don't need that. And I'm going to go ahead and strip the power and the ground. So, with the ground, so take this one, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut this one like right about there. I'm going to take these and strip that. I'm going to twist them together. I will grab this controller, ground, do that on there. Thing goes in sleep mode all the time. You have to wake up here. Alright, and I'm going to solder that. And I mean, most of this, man, I'm just, guys, man, whatever. I'm just soldering stuff to make sure that nothing moves on me. But I mean, this is all going to be cased in epoxy. If you don't use epoxy on this stuff, I mean, you're just kind of opening yourself up for the possibility of issues. You really should consider using epoxy if you're not. You know, just a 2-part potting compound. Epoxy is the same thing. Just more use specific. Potting compound being made for electrical specifically, so I mean I wouldn't use just any epoxy, but you know, function wise it's pretty much the same thing. Alright, so I got my tip there. I'm gonna go ahead and get my ground run back in, tighten it up, make sure it ain't gonna like fall out on you. Feels good. Alright, and so I've got the ground run to the controller. The power. What I'm going to do that is I'm going to feed the power through the center hole. The center hole, like I said, is the connection hole. That's where either side, when you flip the switch, will connect to the center. So the switch toggles back and forth. So center point on these. We'll hit that with solder as well. Solder, solder, solder. I remember back before I did headlights or did any of this stuff, I used to electrical tape everything and just twist the wires together, electrical tape. And for the most part, I never had any issues. But soldering is such a better way to do it. Solder everything if you can. Alright, so there's that. This is the next one. We're going to grab, yeah, like an inch or so there. Strip that off. Twist them together. Need another short little section, yeah, that was attached. Like that. Strip that off. And where'd it go? This is right here. Okay. So I'm gonna hit this just like that and hit that with the solder. So remember, all I'm doing here is I'm attaching a 12-volt source for both the DRL wire that's going to run to the car, so that 12-volt DRL can trigger your demonize, and I'm going to run it to the 12-volt power, so you'll have a choice with that switch of which one you'd rather run. So there we go, right like that. So next thing is going to be to run this right back into your input 2, which is your DRL. Remember, input 1 is your brake. Can also be used as a show mode trigger, which you can preset in the app to make it do whatever show mode you want via a switch or some other form of input. Input 2 is your DRL. Input 3 and 4 is your turn signals. So there we go. So I've got my 5-volt, my 12-volt, and I've got 2 leads here. I'm going to pull this around, try to make this wiring as nice as I can. I know this may be a little sloppier than I'd like it to be, but take that off, take that off. There's those 2, and it really doesn't matter as far as, you know, 1 or 2. I mean, if you really want to be fancy, you can always run it to 1, you can always run it to 2. I kind of used to just label them like DRL and 12 volt, but like, I mean, it's not that hard to figure out which is which, and the center is off. And you do it a couple times, you're going to know what's what, so rather than taking that extra step, I just do this. And one side is 12, one side is DRL. Cool. Okay, so there it is. Make sure they don't touch, because, you know, if you have all 3 of them touching each other, then when you switch to one side, it'll, you know, the 12 volt go directly to your DRLs, and that'll turn, you know, then you don't want that. That ain't going to help you. So there's that. Okay, next part is run our triggers. Now what I'll do with the trigger, because you currently got 3 sets running out, and you want to know which is which, and being that I use the same color wires for all of them, what I'm going to do is I know that red is my DRL, white is one of my turns, and blue is the other turn. So I split it. I take the blue off, and this set will go to the driver's side because it'll have a driver's side turn signal input, and I go the shortest distance possible for the DRL because the DRL is carrying so much power to go towards the RGB controller. So I usually run that to the battery side, which most of the time is driver's side. Next part, I have the controller, which I can run through here, and sometimes it gets a little tight running through. If you have to, you can always pull the grommet off, which I may end up having to do anyways. And it'll be like that. Okay, also, almost forgot about this one. You gotta kind of trim this a little bit, at least for this box. Like that. You gotta pot it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And that way it clears the little lip in there. So there it is. That's all in there. I got the switch. I got my power. 5 volt, 12 volt. So this is fits right on there just perfect. I mean, it just, I don't know. To me, I think it looks clean that way. It's small. It works. I don't have this hanging over here with the plug that plugs into this, and then a box here and a box there, and this label and JST connectors that are not waterproof. And I don't know. I don't like that. I think it looks tacky. A lot of people do them. Hey, good for you. Not me. So you probably got a couple different options you can do. You know, different types of two-sided tape that you can use to attach this on top. But I just use this stuff, little like Scotch 3M stuff. Seems to work pretty good. And I just line it up under the bottom side of it. So right like that. Usually takes about 2 layers because the epoxy that they put in there, it doesn't always come up as high. Sometimes it does. But I mean, the main thing is that you want the tape to actually be higher up than the epoxy itself. So then I will line that up basically in line with the grommet. That's one of the reasons why the grommet's offset. It's offset so one, the Ghozt controller naturally wants to come to this side so you have room for your switch. It's also offset so that this can sit here and your switch can be over here. So I mean, you're trying to, you know, work with the box space as best you can. So that's why I don't center the grommet up on the box, and I actually cheated over a little bit. So I know these are my 12 volt because I stripped them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these. I'm going to run it so that it kind of comes down here flush like that. And then cut this. So this is the 12 volt positive and ground, which if you have these specific inverters, you're going to be at red and black 12 volt, yellow and black is 5 volt. It'll be like that. And I got this 18 gauge power wire. Yeah, I mean, it depends. If you know the car and you know how far the battery is, I like to grab about 2 feet, and that gives you plenty of room. And I'll strip that, split it like this, grab more of my heat shrink, like that. Like that. Red, black. When I twist together, I try to make it so that everything can run flush and be, like, you know, clean as possible, less bumps as possible. So like you see the way that I did that, sometimes you'll see people take the wires and twist them together and then fold it or whatever. I mean, that works, but I think this just ends up being a cleaner project. If you're not soldering, this will pull out. It's not a good way to do it, but if you're soldering, I think this is the best way to do it. Come on, get my heat up. There we go. Okay, so I got my ground, my power. Can make sure it's cooled down a little bit there, because that heat will shrink your tubing if you're not careful. But it cools down pretty quick. Alright, I'll slide that just on there. I'm going to hit that with heat again. And there we go. So this will be my power line here. I'm going to run the 5 volt now. Just like that. So I've got my powers here, and I can actually run a larger heat shrink over that. Just right like that. And there it is. Okay, so the next part, we've got the power run. We've got these. So I've already got the basic lines that I need for these here. I'll extend the blue here in a little bit, but and it's basically what I'm looking for. So now I'm going to extend this here. So I'm going to cut that down a little bit shorter. I mean, the shorter that you can make this, because what you're going to be doing is splitting this off. So if you split it off up here, you're going to have to run like a sheath or something up here. So it sticks out a little bit further, and I try to not do that if I can get away with it. So I'll kind of bring it down a little bit further down, as long as I know that I can still strip the wires. So I'll get in there, I can just barely get enough wire I can work with it. And then I got these 5-pin. Right like that. And I'm just gonna connect them together. So we're having fingernail helps. Alright, right like that. So I got the color to color, white to white, blue to blue, green to green, red to red, black to black. Alright, so yeah, what did I do? There it is. Okay. So I got that ran like that. And I'm gonna need more of the shrink tubing. Need 5 of these. Well, I mean, it depends. I'm running RGBW, so I need 5. If you're running RGB, you need 4. If you're not running any, then you can skip this entire process. But this is how I make mine if I'm running Demon Eyes on a set, which let's say most of mine are. So. Like that. Okay, so the next part, what I do to kind of make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to split these. So we'll just say one is driver's side, one's passenger, just like that. Alright, so just like that. So you got your two split off there, one driver, one passenger side. I'm going to extend this so that it's the same length. I will go ahead and trim this one. So I'm trying to make them all end up the same length here. Alright, so I'm going to extend the turn signal here. I'm going to turn it into a yellow, just because, I mean, it really doesn't matter what I use. But yellow is generally considered turn signal color, at least from like diode, profile, and all them guys. So, being that's what I got, that's what I'm going to use. Alright, so now that I got the wires that I need lengthwise, that's when we go into this little PEX sleeving here. And you're just going to get enough to cover what you need. This stuff does flex, so you got to consider like this is a good bit smaller than what the wiring that I'm using it for, so I'm gonna cut a little bit extra. Like this. And it just slides over. I mean, once again, I'm just trying to keep this as clean as possible, so when it's all set. For the PEX, I like to use a adhesive lined shrink tubing, because when you heat it up, it'll grip a lot better and it won't slide off. Alright, so I have gotten the PEX on about as far as I need to go with it. So the next part is going to be your connectors, and you know there's tons of them out there. You just, you know, however many pins you're running. I'm running 10 on driver and 9 on passenger. I do have 9-pin connectors, 8-pin connectors, and all that stuff too. But I'm just going to run 2 10s on this set. So, got a kit here, and I'll just start on this one. Basically, just gonna strip off just a little bit of each of these wires, like that, and then split them. Run the little rubber boot, and then grab the appropriate clip, clamp it on, and plug it in your plug. But that gives me all the wires I need are right here. That'll be into that. It's one quick connection. It's waterproof. If you need to pull your lights out, it makes it a lot easier. I think it's just a cleaner connection than doing the JSTs. This style, that's what they're called, JSTs. So the JSTs is what normally comes with this stuff. I don't like them as much. M8s are good, but you know, I don't really want to have like 5 connections that people have to try to connect or disconnect, 3, even 2. I really like just having one connection for each light. I think it's just cleaner. As you can see, you know, it's all running sleeving like this. Alright, so I went ahead and got all this squared away here. I did add in the fuse holder there as well. Soldered in and shrink tubed it, as well as adding little 1/4-inch terminals there. So it's pretty much ready to install. These are done now as well. I'm not going to go over those because it all just depends on what control or what connectors you're using. Each of them are a little bit different. In general, you're going to want to have crimpers. You know, I get different styles. Like this one here is usually the one that you want. I don't know, this is like a IWIS, and it's interchangeable one, so I can actually change out the tips. But yeah, I mean, I use this one mostly. It works pretty good at making a good crimp. So yeah, you're going to want to check your connections. You know, obviously a lot of this is going to be making sure that you do the right connection wires. It does not ultimately matter what order you put yours in, as long as it's the same on the connecting wire. You'll see on the headlight here, I wasn't really going to go over the actual wiring of the headlight, but because that just all depends on you. But I mean, basically I have my JST in, which is like 3 wires going in for the JST. I have my 5 wires for the RGBW, and I have my trigger wires. On the battery side, I have a DRL and a turn, and on the non-battery side, I will have just a turn signal wire. If I can get away with it, I'll usually put the controller on the inside of the light, the driver for the Demon Eye, and any other drivers that I can. You know, try to keep it as clean as I can. Hopefully, in the end, it looks cleaner. There's a lot less to it. I've seen a lot of guys that run, you know, so many plugs and drivers and controllers, and plug this up, and install becomes hours long, and you're on the phone with the customer trying to explain how to do everything because they thought they could do it themselves, and they really should have paid somebody to do it. This way, I mean, most of the time, my customers install it themselves. They don't have any issues. There's still, yeah, I mean, some people should not be doing their own electrical work at all. I have had people ask, what does the red wire and the black wire go to? I mean, that's pretty obvious. And I even label them. I haven't put the labels on them, but I got a label maker. I put it on there, 12 volt and ground. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that. If, you know, if you don't know the answer to that one, you really shouldn't be doing this yourself. So, yeah, okay. So I got that. I got this hooked up. I'm going to turn this one around and run this. So I got it hooked up now. Demon Eye's working fine. I'll check the Ghost. Ghost is working fine. I'll program this later. I've already got a video covering that. So I've tested it. Everything looks good. My next step is going to be to open the controller and pot it. And then, yeah, I'll set up I'll program it. It'll be potted. I'll probably run it for a couple days just to test it out, make sure everything's running right. And that's pretty much it. So after that, I usually will wrap it up. Something like that. Take a zip tie. And I'll ship it like that. So that's just the way I do it. I know there's a couple of people that asked, so I figured I'd at some point when I had to get another one of these done, I'd go ahead and try to shoot a video, and I'll get this edited at some point, get it posted up, and for those of you that find it helpful, great. I'm sure there's numerous ways to do it that people prefer, and that's their prerogative, but this is the way that I do it, the way that I prefer to do it, and I think it just makes for a more clean install and easier on the install day.